Sean, great to see you. Thank you for taking a bit of time to come and have a chat. I know you're busy, so I appreciate you making time to come and talk to me. I want to kick off by asking you about something that we talked about a few weeks back. You said to me that you wanted to push against the kind of collective wisdom about how work is supposed to work, if you like. I
Mhm.
mean, what did you mean by that, and how are you going to do that?
Yeah, great question. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for having me on the podcast. So my company, Noria, we provide coaching and leadership development for organizations and individuals, but it has been evolving into something much more interesting since we've started to focus more on women and also just how the world of work has been evolving so much in the past few years. And so your question is that, yeah, we're pushing up against the conventional wisdom and thinking about how, you should show up at work, what the work culture should be, how it should be structured, because it's still structured in a way that it's always been, that has been
Yeah.
familiar to us for the past 50 or more years. And yet, so much has changed and evolved and is continuing to evolve now, even more rapidly so. And so, why are we still stuck in these systems that are totally outdated and not meeting the needs of the culture? And why we started to focus on women specifically is that, the world of work is evolving for everyone right now. Um, but, we're a team of women, so that's one thing. We're feeling this acutely, but women are having a very specific moment as well at this time. So in the US, in just last year alone, 500,000 women left the workforce. And so that's huge. And that's a signal that something is breaking, something is unsustainable. And so we are pushing up against this kind of cultural backlash that I think the pandemic opened up a lot of
Yeah.
possibility for
Yeah.
what work could look like. And now there's been this backlash to go backwards to the more traditional, conventional norms of what we've been used to. And we're pushing up against that and saying, no, we're not going backwards. This is not the way that the world is evolving. And in fact, this is
Yeah.
not good for women specifically either.
And let me ask you a couple of questions. So the first question I want to ask is just give us a sense of why. I mean, you mentioned 500,000 women leaving the workforce. I mean, do you have a sense of why? That's the first question. And the second question is, what do you want to do about it? So tell me about what you think is, if you like, pushing women out of the labor market.
So I think the most acute thing was, so this happened in 2025, and we saw in 2025 a big cultural backlash against a lot of the flexibility that opened up
Right.
during the pandemic. So I would say return to office mandates were a big, big part of this. Whereas, so where we're at right now culturally is that the way work has been designed, it was essentially designed for men, and specifically men that had wives at home
Yeah.
managing most of the
Yeah.
household duties and caretaking responsibilities. We are nowhere near that reality anymore. That is the vast majority. There's about like 20% of families that have a stay-at-home parent now managing all of that. So most families, most couples, they need dual income to survive and to make enough money to, live life. That is very expensive right now. So that means both parents are working and women are working full time. And so the pandemic, what happened is that it opened up this possibility of like, okay, maybe we work can look differently to meet the needs of what's going on in our current reality, which is that we don't have someone at home managing all of the life tasks and caretaking responsibilities. So what is this going to look like? And what it looked like is that more flexibility, working remotely, not having
Yeah.
to commute for 2 hours a day. Um, and then what happened last year is that there were all these return to office mandates. And I think that pushed out women specifically, because the other part of this is that even though, the way that women are working has evolved, women are also still carrying the vast majority of the household responsibilities and caretaking responsibilities. So they're both working full time and still doing the majority of the housework and the caretaking. And so that is just totally unsustainable.
Mm.
And now putting on top, and so I think the pandemic opened up some possibility of like, this is some flexibility that makes this more sustainable. Going back into the office, butts in seats, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday is just totally unsustainable. So I
And
think,
let me just quickly ask you
yeah.
about that. I mean, I'll come on to what you want to do about it in a second, but the
Mhm.
thing about going back into work, I mean,
Mhm.
what do you think is driving that? I mean, I think the
Yeah.
pandemic was interesting because prior to the
Mhm.
pandemic, everyone would say, oh, no, you can't really have a lot of flexibility. You've got to have people in the office. And then the
Yeah.
pandemic came along, and of course, not every business, but lots and lots of businesses survived perfectly well during the pandemic
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
people working remotely. And you see, and I speak to them on the podcast, you see quite a lot of people that run businesses that are still completely remote. They don't
Yeah.
have an office in many cases. What do you think is driving this? You've got to come back into the office. Now, I recognize there might be certain specific industries where it is
Yeah.
important to have people in the office. But for the
Yeah.
vast majority, you can work perfectly well remotely. So what's driving that push to get people back in, would you say?
Yeah, I would say if there's not a clear business case or data supporting this mandate to come back into the office, then it's more emotional and psychological.
Because people want to go back to the good old days.
Go back to the good old days. I think it's a form of control. It's that very old conventional top-down
Yeah.
command and control mentality. And it's that I need to see people in the office to make sure that they are doing the work. I need to have eyes on them. And so it's a lot of fear, lack of control, wanting to return to these old norms. That's my opinion. If there's not a clear business case to make people come back into the office, which I don't think there is for a lot.
Mhm.
For some, like you said, yes. Then, yeah, I think it's emotional and psychological and it has to do with control.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the more important part, which is
Hmm.
what do you think we should do about this? I mean, I accept your
Yeah.
point about the problem.
Yep.
Tell me what you think we should do about it. I mean, what's your take on the solution to that? And what's your, I mean, the Noria platform that you're developing, I mean, what's your kind of contribution to fixing that problem, would you say?
Yeah. So we work with individuals and organizations. So the organizations that we've been working with, we're really trying to, and a lot of them are women-founded, women-led organizations or
Right.
women-led teams, which they're just a bit more open, we've
Yeah.
discovered. I mean, that's been the interesting part of our evolving business model is that at a certain point we said, we're seeing Mark Zuckerberg talk about there needs to be more masculinity in the workplace and, everything that came down from the Trump administration. And we thought, okay, we need to go in a different direction. And women leaders seem to be more open to what we are offering. And so the work that we've been doing in their organizations and businesses is really, kind of giving them permission to lean into the strengths that they have and the way that they want to do business that might look different than what they've come up in or what they've been told they need to do. So, for example, really leaning into sustainable leadership tactics. How are you slowing down to speed up? Are there ways that you are creating an environment that is not just burning people out and extracting everything that you can from them and then, discarding them to the side when you're done? How are you actually cultivating a culture where people feel safe, where they feel valued, where they feel like it's okay to take a break when they need it, where you can kind of talk about these things? So we do an exercise, for example, it's called a well check. And it's really simple. It's like on a scale of 1 to 10, how full is your well today? If you're, and that's a
Right.
basically a capacity check.
Yeah.
Um, if it's at 0, that means I'm totally depleted. I have nothing left. I'm running on fumes. If you're at 10, it's like I am firing at all on all cylinders. And so you can do that as a team activity. And it just opens it up to this more human experience of like, okay, this person is at a 2 I'm at an 8. How can I help them out right now? And that's going to shift over time. So it's just like it's bringing in more humanity into
Yeah.
the workplace during a time where that's being taken out and kind of giving leaders the tools and permission to do so.
And just to put that into the kind of business context, I mean, what you're
Yeah.
just so I've understood the argument correctly, what you're saying
Mhm.
is that you look after the people by looking after their humanity, looking after the flexibility, and
Yep.
that in turn will give the business a competitive edge. Because ultimately, that's what it's. I mean, if your people are your biggest asset, helping
Yes.
them become competitive is the key to success, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So
So
that's your argument. Have I summarized that fairly?
yes, that is definitely the argument is take care of your people and they will take care of you. And this concept of sustainable leadership where you're sustaining your team and their ability to show up at full capacity in the ways that you need them to. And that's not always just pushing on the gas pedal at all times because that's, unfortunately not the way that humans work.
Well, it's not sustainable. I mean, to come back to your earlier point, I mean,
Yeah.
you can run at 120 miles an hour, but not all the time.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And then looking at these different models of flexibility,
Mm,
um, how can we have grace for the people that need flexible work options
mm,
and it's not a simple answer. They're still running businesses. Everyone can't do
mm.
whatever they want all the time. So it's really grappling with these details around, okay, what is the business that you have? What flexibility and grace can you provide to your team members? But then also, where do they need to step in as needed? And how do you have that mutual agreement? How do you create that culture where there's reciprocity between leadership and the team?
And let me ask you about that reciprocity issue, because one of the things I'm curious about is to what extent has this emerged from your thinking about
Hmm.
the issue, and to what extent has what you're doing been, if you like, co-created with the people you work with? I mean, is this is
Yeah,
just your grand plan, or is this something that has been developed in conjunction with the people you work with? I mean, is there a feeling of, I mean, my feeling is that there's a sense of co-creation happening.
absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think everything that we do is a co-creative process. I'm trained as a coach, and so, that's my profession by trade. And coaching is so collaborative and co-creative in that
Mm.
regard. It's the assumption that the person who is actually living this, so the leader who is embedded in the organization, they know what to do better than I know what to do. But I can come in and bring, my frameworks and my wisdom and my experience from doing this for so long and provide them with, here's the research on what we're looking at. Here are some ways and tools that you can do it. But how is this going to work for you? Like
Yeah.
what are your constraints? What are your needs? What are your specific challenges? And then that's meeting somewhere in the middle.
And
And that's, I think, what all leaders need to be doing right now is taking this more co-creative approach.
yeah, and the Noria framework that you've developed. I mean, I was quite interested in that when you explained it to me the other way. Just
Mm.
quickly, just explain that for people.
Yeah, so we actually have we developed an online course and it was inspired by the pandemic, which has been so
Right.
interesting because
Mhm.
we're seeing now, wow, this course that we created is so applicable now because we're in a moment that feels a little similar to what it felt like in the early pandemic days. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, a lot of emotions that you need to manage as a leader. Um, and so we came up with this framework and we call it water. And that's back to like, filling your well. And so how do you create a culture that is going to be sustainable, that is going to fill the wells of your team members? And so the first one is it's an acronym. So wake up to yourself. And that's all about self-awareness as a
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah.
So, what are your triggers? How are you reacting or responding to this moment? What are you projecting onto your team members? What kind of, environment are you creating? So, self-awareness and self-regulation. The next one is assess your environment. So, looking at the larger environment that you've created and knowing that environment is hugely influential on an individual and team's behavior. Tune into others is the next one. So that's all about coaching. So one-on-one, how are you relating to your team members? And I think this is so important in the age of AI, is that leaders
Yeah,
need to be able to extract, you know, if all the tasks are becoming automated and rote, then you're left with not just telling people what to do, but you have to be able to, pull from them
yeah. I mean,
what are their talents.
it's a really interesting point you made. I mean, we'll come back to the other two
Yeah.
components of water in a second, but it's a really interesting point you've made because one of the shifts is that it's now, I mean, going forward, one of the main skills you've got to learn is how to ask the right questions rather than just be out of spout the same old ideas. I mean, you've got to ask the
Yeah.
right questions. Otherwise, you don't get to the information that you need. So I think there's a big change happening at the moment, just as you've, suggested.
Yeah, there's a huge change. You can't just be telling people what to do. You kind of
Mm.
have to be helping them learn how to think and how to build for themselves and how to create for themselves. And I think you're really, as a leader, you need to be able to extract the essence and the talent and the unique gifts that each of your team members has. And that's what's going to allow you to, have a leg up, is everyone functioning at the peak of their potential? Because
Yeah.
that's the opportunity of this moment, I believe.
Yeah. And the other two bits of the acronym?
The other two are encourage belonging.
Right.
So, how are you, okay, so if you encourage everyone to think and build for themselves, how are you going to keep them sticking around?
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
suddenly now they're going to have these skills where they could say, I'm out of here. I'm building for myself. And trust is low at work right now
Yep.
and in institutions. So people are already one foot out the door. So encouraging belonging, I think, is crucial
Mhm.
for leaders right now in terms of maintaining a team and giving people what I think they're desperately looking for right now, which is a sense of belonging to combat the isolation that we're all feeling. And then the last one is remember your why, which is also connected to this. So meaning and purpose. What is the meaning of any of this work?
Mm.
And why is that connected to, the team's purpose, the organization's purpose, and then also the individual's purpose? So again, people are searching for work that feels meaningful to them. They're searching for environments where they feel valued and where they feel like their purpose is aligned with what they're doing.
And so let me take you back to, I mean, how did you, I mean, I know you're a coach, but how did you kind of get onto this journey towards developing this particular framework and approach that you're using now? I mean, just take us back to the
Yeah.
beginning. I mean, how did you get on this sort of journey?
Yeah. So I worked for many years in healthcare. And what I did at this one company, I was building out the care navigation and coaching programs. It was a national primary care organization in the States. Um, and then the pandemic hit. And like everyone, the world was turned upside down. But I think, especially if you worked in healthcare,
Mm.
things went especially, bananas, bonkers. Um, and so it was really hard. I had a lot of colleagues who were on the front lines, a lot of providers who were in leadership positions, so doctors or nurses who were having to lead these teams of doctors and nurses. And I could like cry thinking about it. It was so intense. They were having to manage all of this anxiety and uncertainty among the patients they were working with and illness and death.
Mm.
Um, and then the anxiety among their team members and then the anxiety within themselves. And so I was brought in as support for them. I was working in this capacity of leadership and coaching and doing a lot of stress and anxiety work with, our enterprise clients and patients. So I was brought in and asked, how can you support these provider leads in navigating this really intense moment that has, it's less about like management of tasks and it's more about management of emotions and the like
Yeah.
human experience that's happening right now for them and their team members. And so I was doing this. I brought on my now co-founder, Allie, to help me because I was like, this is a lot. It was a lot to hold. And yeah, that cracked open the idea of wow, we have been trained as these health and wellness coaches, and we have these very specific skills
Mm.
that are so needed in this moment in time right now, um, for leaders to be able to navigate this with their teams. So yeah, that was the origin, was the pandemic, and then it's evolved.
And let me ask you about the other side to that is where are you going with it? I mean, what do you
Yeah.
if how can I put it? What are you building towards, if you like? Where are you going?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, we joke all the time that like I mean, the past 5 years since we hatched this idea, it has just been wild. It has been a roller coaster, I think, for anyone who's been starting a business. So we're kind of, we're in the air building the plane as it goes and just keeping a pulse on the need and the culture and what is evolving, in real time. And so, what I'll say right now of where we think we're going with this is that we've really tapped into something with women specifically.
Yeah.
Like I said, back to this, we're watching all of this cultural backlash, this, um, 500,000 women leaving the workforce. And so, what we want to do with this is that we want to start with women where we feel like we have more of a like opening.
Yeah.
Um, and, but we ultimately want to shift the culture of work. We want to, you know, but we want to create a more sustainable way of working. And because we are so far from that right now. And that's part of my background as well, is that while I was working at my former company, I was doing a lot of coaching with our enterprise clients at companies like Google and Amazon and a lot of the like really intense Silicon Valley um, companies. And just the way that we work is making people miserable. We
And you
have
want to change that. You want to make them happier, presumably.
I want to make them happier. I want to equip, create these environments that are going to allow people to thrive because that is what it's going to allow them to do their best work. And I think women specifically are drowning right now. And for as capable as we are, I look around at my colleagues, at my friends, the amount that we can manage and hold at one time is truly incredible. And I just think if half of that burden was taken off of us, what would we actually be capable of?
Mm.
I think we would be capable of doing amazing, amazing
So,
things for the world.
so what? So let me just sorry, just so I understand this correctly. What you're because I think there's a very powerful logic here. What you're saying is if you remove the barriers, those
Hmm.
people can really excel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think they could excel in ways that the world really needs right now.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. So let me ask you about the kind of mechanics of making all that happen. I mean, how do you feel about being the CEO?
Well, I'm not the CEO. My partner's the CEO, but I'm the COO, the Chief Operating Officer. So how do I feel about that? I think, as the COO, I am having to walk the talk. What are the systems that I'm putting in place
Mm.
that are going to make this sustainable for us? And we are a team of 4 women. Three of us have kids, and we are in early motherhood stages. So it's just a really intense moment in time. We don't have any investors, so we're
Right.
bootstrapping this ourselves. None of us are bankrolled by our partners. Um, Two of the women on my team are the breadwinners in their family, and
Right.
they have other businesses. They have one-on-one coaching practices. So, we have a lot going on while we're trying to stand up this business. A lot of demands on our time and our energy. And so as COO, I'm trying to figure out the systems that support all of that and also support our business and, getting off the ground.
I mean, maybe I should put the question in a slightly better way, which isn't role specific, if you like. But how do you feel about building the business? I mean, because there's
Mm.
the thing that strikes me about the current sort of moment is that there's huge amounts of uncertainty, and of
Yeah.
course, AI is changing a lot of how knowledge-based work happens. So I suppose
Yeah.
the slightly better question is how do you feel about building a business in the current environment?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think we have to stay adaptable, incredibly adaptable.
Mm,
We have to keep our pulse on the culture and how things are evolving in real time and be able to pivot and adapt and to meet those needs. I think we need to use AI really smartly and also be discerning about it. So that's something that I've been learning, from a systems perspective. Oh my gosh, AI has been incredible. I think AI is opening the doors for a lot of women who are
mm,
historically very underfunded when it comes to, getting VC money or any kind of investment money. Now, I have a CFO and a CMO and all of these things right within Claude. So I'm using that to outsource the work that I'm not good at. But I think a big thing that I've been learning is that I cannot outsource a lot of the work that is kind of what makes us special to AI. And so much of what makes us special is, we are in the business of transformation and deeply human experiences. And AI is just not, anytime I've asked AI to help me with curriculum or designing something, it's just not hitting it. So, being discerning in that way of when to use the tools and when not to, um, being open to adapting and pivoting and, building the airplane as you're flying it. Uh, yeah, that's I think how we've been. And then, also how can this be different? So back to, getting outside of those things that have just been the norms for so long. So I'll use my company as an example. Like I just said, 4 women. 3 of us are mothers. None of us are
mm,
bankrolled by investors or our partners. And so we've had to wrestle with, this is going to be a longer timeline. This is going to be a slower build for us.
mm,
We are unable to go all in at this moment in our lives into building this business. And so how do we adapt our expectations
mm.
on how quickly things
And
move?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, how have you done that?
I think we've just had to check ourselves. When are we putting, like, when are we internally imposing these expectations on
Mm,
ourselves about what this should look like and how successful this should be, and at what point we should be reaching some, point of success? Because the reality is that we have different constraints
mm,
than, say, someone who is 22 and,
yeah.
all in on everything and doesn't have a lot of risk financially, So yeah, it's just having these conversations of it's okay for this to look different. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just different. And this is an example of how we're bucking up against the norms.
Mm. I think the other thing that's interesting about what you've said is, one of the big, I don't know what it's like in America, but certainly one of the big criticisms in the UK is that business is always short-term focused. I mean, what you're saying is you're having to think long-term because
Mm,
you can't just chuck in a dollar per cash and then grow the business really quickly. You're having to think long-term.
yeah. Yeah. We're thinking long term and we're designing around, our values, our
Mm.
needs, and our freedom ultimately. We're literally walking the talk in real time in how we're building this business, and then we're supporting women in doing the same.
Yeah. And let me ask you about that process. Have you ever sort of had a situation where, if you like, the business has gone beyond your expertise?
Good question. In what way are you thinking?
Well, in any way, really. I mean,
Yeah.
what I'm wondering is, do you, or maybe you have moments when you think, oh God, I have no idea how to deal with these things. I mean, do you ever have,
Yeah.
when it's kind of outside your experiences and you're thinking, this is a totally new thing I've got to deal with. Have you had experiences like that? And if so, how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, yeah. I would say there have been times where, just because of the nature of work that we do, that falls more into kind of an HR category,
Right.
where I want to bring in someone who has that specific expertise, whether it's legal or just, they know the tools or the processes and whatnot. Um, yeah, we've definitely experienced that before where I've been like, I'm not an HR person. And so this is outside the realm of what we want to be doing. There's been some times where, it's gone more into this kind of tactical systemic work, which we've been able to work with because myself and then one of our other team members is more operationally minded. But that's not the core of what our business is doing. It's leadership development, not, systems implementation exactly. So we have to check ourselves of, when is this going outside of the bounds? Because again, as women, I think we tend to overfunction. We want to solve the problem. We want to be all the things for all the people and our clients. And then no, it's bringing in people that actually have those expertise that we know and trust
Yeah.
and letting our clients know.
Yeah. And let me ask you about sorry, this is slightly beyond the kind of remit of the podcast, really, but I'm interested in this question. Do you think, as a group of women, that you define leadership development in a different way to the way perhaps men would?
Is there a group of women that we define?
No, no. Do you, as a group of women, do you define leadership development in a different way to men? I'm just wondering if you find the
Oh,
problem in a different way.
honestly, no. I
Right.
think,
Okay.
you know, any, and we've worked with tons of men,
Right.
th this has simply been a direction that we've just seen the business go in because we needed to niche down. We saw more of an openness with women, but men need these same exact skills, maybe more so than
Mm,
women.
mm,
Women are more inclined. So a lot of what we're doing is, and again, which I think is so interesting in the age of AI, is helping leaders lean into the more human-centered,
mm,
quote unquote, soft skills that have always been come secondary in leadership. But the hard skills are getting automated at this point. So it's those human skills that are really going to set you above the rest. And every leader needs that, not just women. Women, I think, are actually it comes easier to them. And it's more about saying, like, you don't need to push those parts of yourself into the shadow anymore, like you've
mm,
done for so long to fit into this, mold of how you're supposed to behave at work. It's more saying those are actually
mm,
your most valuable skills. And then with men, I think it's pulling that out of them as well and maybe doing a little bit more teaching because it hasn't come as easier to
mm.
some
I
male
mean,
leaders.
what was behind my question is if you were to ask a whole load of guys what they thought good leadership was, I think you'd probably get slightly different answers to if you asked a bunch of women what they think good leadership is. That's why I was
I
asking
think,
because I think
yeah,
people come at it in different ways. People think that there's a different thing that looks good, if you see what I mean, which is the thing that interests me because
yeah.
it's those expectations that shape how people behave.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there always has been expectations on men to be tougher,
Mm.
harder,
Yeah.
more command and control. That's how, men have been conditioned, and women have been conditioned to be more caretakers
Mm.
traditionally. And then that's what the rub is when you get into a leadership role in a traditional, more masculine environment, is that those caretaking qualities, you know, siphon those off
Yeah.
and but everyone needs a blend, and it's really, yeah, it shows up in men and women, but when we talk about masculine and feminine leadership traits, it's really about the qualities or the energetics,
Mm.
it's not male or female. um and you should have a blend. You should have a good balance of masculine and feminine
Mm.
qualities in your leadership.
Mm. And let me ask you about making mistakes. I mean, one of the things I love about entrepreneurs is they're generally more open about mistakes. I mean, if you sometimes when you talk to
Mhm.
people in the public sector, I mean, they never admit they've ever done anything wrong. Entrepreneurs are usually, okay, well, I got that wrong, so I'm going to fix it by doing, because if you don't fix things, you go out of business. So I
Yeah.
think entrepreneurs tend to be more open about that process of making mistakes, working out what they've
Mm.
done wrong, working out how to fix it, doing that, and so on. I mean, what's your take on making mistakes? I mean, what sort of mistakes have you made, for example?
Oh, it's a good question. Um, Gosh, I mean, I think being an entrepreneur, you have to be very open to making mistakes
Mm,
because, like I said, and maybe you're so open and this is just what's coming to mind. It's like you're so open to mistakes that they don't even feel like mistakes. They're just, part of the process. You're just iterating constantly. And so you're so comfortable with mistakes that they don't even feel like this big, like, oh, mistake, failure. It's just like, oh, that didn't work. We tried, and now we're going to adapt and do something differently. Um, I think I'm trying to think of a classic mistake. I mean, the thing that comes to mind, oh, okay, this is a good learning. I would have before, so we developed this online course, which, you know, n now I'm like, oh, we were so prescient in so many ways. It's really kind of amazing because it's really meeting the moment.
Mm.
But I would have done that differently. I would have spent a lot more time just getting in there and doing the work live without really knowing what we were doing before creating something and recording it and like setting it in stone and putting all of this work into it. I think I feel much more comfortable now just going into something very open-ended and having it be this more co-creative, collaborative process, without having it be all buttoned up from the very beginning. Because the risk that you take, and I think the mistake that we made, is that you spend all this time and all this effort creating something, and then and then you put it into the real world and you see, oh, there are all these things that we're missing from it. And we should have just started with this unfinished product and tested it in real time, which
Yeah.
feels riskier, but it creates a much better product in the long run.
Yeah, I guess, and if you get a prototype out there and you get feedback from customers, it comes back to that co-creation piece, doesn't it? You get the
Yeah.
input of the people that you're seeking to work with,
Yeah.
which helps kind of sharpen it up a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And would you say that is a reflection of the way your approach to decision making has changed? Would you say you, I mean, it's the first question. Really. Would you say that one of the things that's changed is the way you approach decision making now? Has that been affected by what you've been doing?
Yeah. So with that example specifically, and again, I can bring it back to women. And again, it's not just a women thing, but it's so interesting. These are the things, these are the themes that come up.
Mm.
We also have this group called the Residency, which we work with individual women who are in leadership positions or building their own businesses. And perfectionism comes up a lot. And
Right.
so I think that's what was coming up for me and my team, is that we wanted it to be perfect. We wanted it to be this immaculate, impeccable product and course. And now we're seeing, no, perfectionism really holds you back in a lot of ways. And so I think that is impacting my decision making, is that, just do it. Let's just see what happens. And it doesn't have to be fully baked and it doesn't have to be
Mm.
perfect. And we're going to be better for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you flagged that point about perfectionism. I mean, I've seen that where
Yeah.
people can't let anything go. They don't want anything to go public until they think it's perfect, which of course means it then goes public far too late usually.
Far too late. Yeah.
Mm.
And then it's missing
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
usually. Yeah.
So let's just go back to the journey that you've been on. I mean, what would you say the big things are that you've learned on the journey you've been on?
Oh, it's a big question. Um, oh my goodness. I think it has one of the biggest ones has been to trust myself and to be myself. Um,
So sorry, let me just ask you, that's a really interesting point. So what you're saying is before, if you were to go back a few years, you didn't trust yourself and you weren't yourself. I mean, that's a big statement. So let
mm,
me ask you, why didn't you trust yourself? That's a very interesting point.
yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the context I would give is that I've just seen myself, the women that I've been working with, the company that we've been building evolve into a more authentic offering that really aligns with who we are and what we care about. And part of that is this, like, yeah, we're not going to try to fit into this corporate mold.
Right.
We're not going to try to be everything for everyone and, you know, create something that is going to work really well in some like corporate setting that's really traditional and conventional. And with this women-owned, you know, funky creative company, it's like we just have to be who we are. And I think in the beginning, yeah, there was fear around not being everything for everyone or not fitting in and not being professional enough or whatever that might be. And we've just seen the business really start to take off once we leaned into who we are, really,
And
who we are.
why did that happen? I mean, what is it about being who you are, if you like, that has suddenly enabled the business to take off? I mean, that's a
Because I
very interesting point. I mean, I'm just wondering what's the why did that happen? I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying why did it happen?
Yeah, because I think our clients, the clients who are meant to be with us, who are meant to work with us,
Right.
see themselves in us. And so, out of all the many, I mean, this is a crowded space, you know, leadership
Yeah.
development and coaching and all of that within the corporate organizational world. Um, so, how do you differentiate? The only way you can differentiate is just be yourself. You know, no one else is like you.
No. Yeah.
So,
I mean,
that's the way to stand out.
it's a really interesting point because what you're saying is that the reason people think the proposition is attractive, because they wouldn't
Hmm.
buy it if they didn't think it was attractive, they think it's attractive because they see a reflection of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
They
very
see,
interesting kind of take on the way you present a proposition to an audience or to a bunch of customers. I mean, it's just interesting. I mean, that's counter to conventional wisdom, which is you sort of set out all the benefits.
yeah. I mean, I think they feel when they see us and how we are approaching these challenges and these situations, it's very resonant to them. They're seeing like that, wow, this is exactly how I feel. I've not been able to put words to it, but these people are articulating it and they are coming up with a solution to it. And so that's the resonance. And so the more that we can lean into like who we are really and what we're about, then we're going to attract the right clients. And that's exactly what's been happening.
And has that idea shaped the way you market the business? I mean, because it's a very interesting
Yeah.
concept that. I mean, when you think about it now, I mean, does that idea, is there evidence of that in the way you've marketed what you do?
Yes. Yes,
Give us
absolutely.
an example. Just explain how that works.
Well, we're working with a fractional CMO right now, who has been really, really helpful. And, you know, she is drawing out of us our personal stories and
Right.
the reason why we are doing this. And you know, she's really creating this emotional resonance in the way that we are, um, you know, writing our newsletters or on social or have, you know, our website. And so yeah, it absolutely has been a way that we are marketing. And, you know, I think the advice that we've received from her is that because our product is so based in this personal connection, this very like human layer, uh, what they are buying is us.
Mm.
So we can't hide that. We can't hide behind a wall of, you know, frameworks and modules and whatever. It's our story, our personality has to be in the forefront. And I think people are really craving that right now. That's another thing is that we're in this moment, AI is making it worse, where everything feels like slop. You know, it's just regurgitated slop.
Yeah.
Who's real? What's real? Is nothing makes me feel anything anymore. And so I think for a lot of businesses, yeah, you're going to have to like come out from behind the curtain and show yourself and who you are and tell your story because that is the way that you're breaking through. That's how you build trust with your team, with your clients, with your customers, um, in a moment where everything just feels totally inauthentic and people have very low trust in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and low trust in lots of other things that are important, politicians and journalists and everything else, not just business, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's everything.
Let me just a couple of questions before we wind up. So, when you look back on the journey, is there anything that, if you were starting from scratch, you'd do differently, perhaps?
Well, I mentioned the perfectionism piece.
Right.
Um, is there anything else that I would do differently? Have to think about that. Um,
Let,
yeah.
let me ask you the same question in a different way then. If
Yeah.
you were to give some advice to somebody starting out on a journey like yours, what would be the
Hmm.
most important piece of advice you'd offer them?
I would say, and we always talk about this, but being an entrepreneur is like going on a spiritual journey.
Right.
It is going to test you in many ways that you
Mm,
probably did not expect. It is going to be a bumpy road. There are going to be ups, there are going to be downs, there are going to be twists, there will be turns. And part of that is to, again, trust yourself, learn the lessons that you are meant to learn. Because if you opted into this journey, that means you've opted into really growing and evolving as
mm,
a human being. This is something that pushes you to evolve. And so that's part of the process, and it's not going to be comfortable. So I would just advise, get support, know that this is what it's going to be like,
mm.
that it's going to be tough at times, but that you are going to come out of it a much more whole version of yourself, and that will be worth everything.
Yeah. I mean, somebody said to me, I forget who it was, somebody said you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable if you want to be an entrepreneur. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But your
Absolutely.
final point is that it's all worth it in the end because it is a journey and it's a fun journey, I think, and it's a journey in which all sorts of insights emerge from, which makes and that's partly what makes life worth living, really, I think. So
Yeah, you get to see what you're capable of,
yeah,
no matter what.
yeah, absolutely. Shawn, thank you for making a bit of time to come and talk to us about what you're doing. I mean, I think you're on a pretty interesting journey, I would say, and thank you for making time to talk to us about it, and good luck going forward.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers. See you soon. Bye bye.